The Castle, German, Das Schloss, also spelled Das Schloss, Das Els, is the last novel by Franz Kafka. In it, a protagonist known only as K arrives in a village and struggles to gain access to the mysterious authorities who govern it from a castle supposedly owned by Graf West. Kafka died before he could finish the work, and the novel was posthumously published against his wishes. Dark and at times surreal, The Castle is often understood to be about alienation, unresponsive bureaucracy, the frustration of trying to conduct business with non-transparent, seemingly arbitrary controlling systems, and the futile pursuit of an unobtainable goal. Franz Kafka, b. the 3rd of July 1883 to the 3rd of June 1924, was a German-language novelist and writer from Prague. He is widely regarded as one of the major figures of 20th-century literature. His work fuses elements of realism and the fantastic. It typically features isolated protagonists facing bizarre or surrealistic predicaments and incomprehensible socio-bureaucratic powers. It has been interpreted as exploring themes of alienation, existential anxiety, guilt, and absurdity. His best-known works include the novella The Metamorphosis and novels The Trial and The Castle. The term Kafkaesque has entered English to describe absurd situations like those depicted in his writing. Kafka was born into a middle-class German-speaking Czech Jewish family in Prague, the capital of the Kingdom of Bohemia, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, today the capital of the Czech Republic. He trained as a lawyer, and after completing his legal education was employed full-time by an insurance company, forcing him to relegate writing to his spare time. Over the course of his life, Kafka wrote hundreds of letters to family and close friends, including his father, with whom he had a strained and formal relationship. He became engaged to several women but never married. He died in obscurity in 1924 at the age of 40 from tuberculosis. Kafka was a prolific writer, spending most of his free time writing, often late in the night. He burned an estimated 90% of his total work due to his persistent struggles with self-doubt. Much of the remaining 10% is lost or otherwise unpublished. Few of Kafka's works were published during his lifetime. The story collections Contemplation in a Country Doctor, and individual stories, such as his novella The Metamorphosis, were published in literary magazines but received little attention. In his will, Kafka instructed his close friend and literary executor Max Brod to destroy his unfinished works, including his novels The Trial, The Castle, and America, but Brod ignored these instructions and had much of his work published. Kafka's writings became famous in German-speaking countries after World War II, influencing German literature, and its influence spread elsewhere in the world in the 1960s. It has also influenced artists, composers, and philosophers. Paranoid fiction is a term sometimes used to describe works of literature that explore the subjective nature of reality and how it can be manipulated by forces in power. These forces can be external, such as a totalitarian government, or they can be internal, such as a character's mental illness or refusal to accept the harshness of the world they are in. Absurdist fiction is a genre of novels, plays, poems, films, or other media that focuses on the experiences of characters in situations where they cannot find any inherent purpose in life, most often represented by ultimately meaningless actions and events that call into question the certainty of existential concepts such as truth or value. 1. The absurdist genre of literature arose in the 1950s and 1960s, first predominantly in France and Germany, prompted by post-war disillusionment. Absurdist fiction is a reaction against the surge in Romanticism in Paris in the 1830s, the collapse of religious tradition in Germany, and the societal and philosophical revolution led by the expressions of Soren Kierkegaard and Friedrich Nietzsche. 2. Common elements in absurdist fiction include satire, dark humor, incongruity, the abasement of reason, and controversy regarding the philosophical condition of being, nothing. 3. Absurdist fiction in play form is known as absurdist theater. Both genres are characterized by a focus on the experience of the characters, centered on the idea that life is incongruous, irreconcilable and meaningless. 4. The integral characteristic of absurdist fiction involves the experience of the struggle to find an intrinsic purpose in life, depicted by characters in their display of meaningless actions in the futile events they take part in. Absurdism is a philosophical movement as an extension of, or divergence from, existentialism, which focuses on the pointlessness of mankind and specifically the emotional angst and anxiety present when the existence of purpose is challenged. 5. Existentialist and agnostic perspectives are explored in absurdist novels and theater in their expression of plot and characters. 6 major absurdist authors include Franz Kafka, Albert Camus, Samuel Beckett, and Eugene Ionesco. Kafka began writing the novel on the evening of the 27th of January 1922, the day he arrived at the mountain resort of Spindlermal, now in the Czech Republic. A picture taken of him upon his arrival shows him by a horse-drawn sleigh in the snow in a setting reminiscent of the castle. Hence, the significance that the first few chapters of the manuscript were written in the first person and at some point later changed by Kafka to a third-person narrator, K. 2. Max Brod. Edit. Kafka died before he could finish the novel, and it is questionable whether he intended to finish it if he had survived his tuberculosis. At one point he told his friend Max Brod that the novel would conclude with K, the book's protagonist, continuing to reside in the village until his death. The castle would notify him on his deathbed that his legal claim to live in the village was not valid, yet, taking certain auxiliary circumstances into account, he was permitted to live and work there. 2. However, on the 11th of September 1922 in a letter to Brod, he wrote he was giving up on the book and would never return to it. 3. As it is, the book ends mid-sentence. Although Brod was instructed by Kafka to destroy all of his unpublished works on his death, Brod instead set about publishing many of them. Das Schloss was originally published in German in 1926 by the publisher Joella Goodman of Munich. This edition sold far less than the 1,500 copies that were printed. 4. It was republished in 1935 by Schocken Verlag in Berlin, and in 1946 by Schocken Books of New York. 5. Brod heavily edited the work to ready it for publication. His goal was to gain acceptance of the work and the author, not to maintain the structure of Kafka's writing. This would play heavily in the future of the translations and continues to be the center of discussion on the text. 6. Brod donated the manuscript to Oxford University. 7. Brod placed a strong religious significance on the symbolism of the castle. 8. This is one possible interpretation of the work based on numerous Judeo-Christian references as noted by many including Arnold Heidsieck. 9. Malcolm Pasley. Edit. The publisher soon realized the translations were bad, and in 1940 desired a completely different approach. 6. In 1961 Malcolm Pasley got access to all of Kafka's works except the trial, and deposited them in Oxford's Bodleian Library. Pasley and a team of scholars Gerhard Neumann, Jost Schillemate, and Jürgen Born started publishing the works in 1982 through S. Fischer Verlag. Das Schloss was published that year as a 2-volume set, the novel in the first volume, and the fragments, deletions, and editor's notes in a second volume. This team restored the original German text to its full and incomplete state, including Kafka's unique punctuation, considered critical to the style. 10. Stromfeld, Roeder Stern. Edit. Interpretations of Kafka's intent for the manuscript are ongoing. At one time Stromfeld Roeder Stern Verlag did work for the rights to publish a critical edition with manuscript and transcription side by side. But they met with resistance from the Kafka heirs and Pasley. 11. The title Das Schloss may be translated as the castle, or the palace, but the German word is a homonym that can also refer to a lock. It is also phonetically close to der Schluss, conclusion, or end. 1. The castle is locked and closed to K and the townspeople, neither can gain access. The castle does not look like a castle. Anthea Bell's translation states that it was an extensive complex of buildings, a few of them with 2 stories, but many of them lower and crowded close together. If you hadn't known it was a castle you might have taken it for a small town. P. 11. Summary. The protagonist, K, arrives in a village governed by a mysterious bureaucracy operating in a nearby castle. When seeking shelter at the town inn, he claims to be a land surveyor summoned by the castle authorities. He is quickly notified that his castle contact is an official named Clam, who, in an introductory note, informs K he will report to the mayor. The mayor informs K that through a mix-up in communication between the castle and the village, he was erroneously requested. But the mayor offers him a position as a caretaker in service of the school teacher. Meanwhile, K, unfamiliar with the customs, bureaucracy and processes of the village, continues to attempt to reach Clam, which is considered a strong taboo to the villagers. The villagers hold the officials and the castle in high regard, even though they do not appear to know what the officials do. The actions of the officials are never explained. The villagers provide assumptions and justification for the officials' actions through lengthy monologues. Everyone appears to have an explanation for the officials' actions, but they often contradict themselves and there is no attempt to hide the ambiguity. Instead, villagers praise it as another action or feature of an official. One of the more obvious contradictions between the official word and the village conception is the dissertation by the secretary Erlanger on Frida's required return to service as a barmaid. K is the only villager who knows that the request is being forced by the castle, even though Frida may be the Genesis 14:15 with no consideration of the inhabitants of the village. The castle is the ultimate bureaucracy with copious paperwork that the bureaucracy maintains as flawless. But the flawlessness is a lie, it is a flaw in the paperwork that has brought K to the village. There are other failures of the system. K witnesses a servant destroying paperwork when he cannot determine who the recipient should be. The castle's occupants appear to be all adult men, and there is little reference to the castle other than to its bureaucratic functions. The two notable exceptions are a fire brigade and that Otto Brunswick's wife declares herself to be from the castle. The latter declaration builds the importance of Hans, Otto's son, in K's eyes as a way to gain access to the castle officials. The officials have one or more secretaries that do their work in their village. Although they sometimes come to the village, they do not interact with the villagers unless they need female companionship, implied to be sexual in nature. K, the protagonist of the story, recognized as a land surveyor, employed as the school janitor, and a stranger to the townspeople. He spends most of the novel doggedly trying to overcome the bureaucracy of the village and to contact the castle official Clam, but he is continually thwarted and frustrated. K forms a sexual relationship with Frida, the barmaid, but she eventually abandons K for one of his assistants, Jeremiah. Major themes. Edit. Theology. Edit. It is well documented where that Broad's original construction was based on religious themes, and this was furthered by the Muirs in their translations. But it has not ended with the critical additions. Numerous interpretations have been made with a variety of theological angles. One interpretation of K's struggle to contact the castle is that it represents a man's search for salvation. 17. According to Mark Harmon, translator of a recent edition of the castle, this was the interpretation favored by the original translators Willem Muir, helped by Edwin, who produced the first English volume in 1930. 12. Harmon feels he has removed the bias in the translations toward this view, but many who still feel this is the point of the book. Fueling the biblical interpretations of the novel are the various names and situations. For example, the official Galater, the German word for Galatians, one of the initial regions to develop a strong Christian following from the work of Apostle Paul and his assistant Barnabas. The name of the messenger, Barnabas, for the same reason. Even the critical edition's naming of the beginning chapter, Arrival, among other things liken K to an Old Testament Messiah. 9. Bureaucracy. Edit. The obvious thread throughout the castle is bureaucracy. The extreme degree is nearly comical, and the village residents' justifications of it are amazing. Hence it is no surprise that many feel that the work is a direct result of the political situation of the era in which it was written, which was shot through with anti-Semitism, remnants of the Habsburg monarchy, etc. 1819. But even in these analyses, the veiled references to more sensitive issues are pointed out. For instance, the treatment of the Barnabas family, with their requirement to first prove guilt before they could request a pardon from it, and the way their fellow villagers desert them, have been pointed out as a direct reference to the anti-Semitic climate at the time. 20. In a review of the novel found in The Guardian, William Burroughs disputes the claim that the castle deals with bureaucracy, claiming that this view trivializes Kafka's literary and artistic vision, while being reductive. He claims, on the other hand, that the book is about solitude, pain, and the desire for companionship. 21. One night, Kay arrives at the unnamed village below the castle of Count Westwest, supposedly having been summoned by the castle authorities to work as a land surveyor. He finds lodging at the Bridge Inn, but an official immediately questions his right to be there. A phone call is made to the castle to state Kay's case, and a second phone call confirms Kay's position. Kay tries to walk up to the castle the following day, but instead gets lost in the maze of streets in the village. He rests in a village house where the inhabitants know who he is but throw him out. He meets his assigned assistants, Artur and Jeremias, who are playful but useless. Kay then meets a messenger, Barnabas, who brings him a letter from Clam, a director at the castle. Kay tries to walk to the castle again but ends up in Barnabas's house. He meets his sister Olga, who accompanies him to the gentleman's inn. There, Kay meets the barmaid Frida, who is Clam's mistress. During the evening, Frida and Kay become intimate, and Frida declares she is leaving Clam for Kay. The landlady of the Bridge Inn warns Kay that he has done Frida a disservice in taking her away from Clam and that he must marry Frida. Kay visits the village chairman, who tells him a surveyor is not required and explains in depth the long and tortuous bureaucratic process behind Kay's case and the loss of his file. He says Kay will be treated courteously while they await an answer from Clam. Kay meets the Bridge Inn landlady again, and she tells him how Clam broke her heart before her marriage and how she has never recovered. She agrees to try to set up a meeting with Clam. Meanwhile, Kay meets a teacher who offers him a job as a school janitor. The conditions are poor, but Frida persuades Kay to take the job. Kay goes to the gentleman's inn to look for Clam, but the director evades him. Instead, Kay meets a secretary there who tries to interrogate Kay and take a deposition from him, but Kay refuses. Kay receives a letter from Clam praising him for his work as land surveyor, which Kay has not done. Kay goes to the schoolroom, where he must sleep, with Frida and the ever-present assistants. They break into the woodshed to get wood to keep warm, and the next day the teacher sacks Kay for this, after Frida betrays Kay's guilt instead of allowing the assistants to be punished. Kay becomes increasingly suspicious of Frida's intentions toward him. Kay agrees to help the mother of a boy, Hans Brunswick, who is sick. Kay believes that she and her husband can help him reach the castle. Kay visits Barnabas's house in search of a reply from Clam, and Olga tells him the long story of how a castle official caused the ruin of the family, due to her sister Amalia not agreeing to give him sexual favors. Olga says the family are dependent on Kay now because she has told him the story. Frida leaves Kay for Jeremiah's and returns to the inn because she believes Kay has been unfaithful with Olga or Amalia. Jeremiah's tells Kay that he and his brother were employed by the castle to cheer Kay up. Kay is summoned to the gentleman's inn to meet an official named Erlanger. He falls asleep in the room of a secretary called Burgle while the official tells Kay he can help him. Kay wakes and finds Erlanger, who directs him to ensure Frida returns to the taproom. Kay witnesses the chaotic distribution of files among the rooms along the corridor. Kay gives up his fight to reach the castle and meet Clam, and is finally accepted by some of the villagers and offered lodging. The story ends mid-sentence. Momus, the village secretary, a deputy of Clam. Jissa, the lady schoolteacher. Sortini, a great official at the castle who once wrote an obscene letter to Amalia. The central character of the castle is once again a figure simply called by the letter K. He arrives in a small town claiming to have been hired by the local landowners as a surveyor and announcing that his assistants will follow the next day. Communication with the castle does not support Kay's assertions, but before the townspeople can react to Kay's falsehood, the castle confirms Kay's appointment. The rest of the novel involves attempts by the new surveyor to gain admission to the castle. He eventually dies, largely of neglect, amidst the townspeople among whom he has been living. As with Kafka's other protagonists, Kay remains a shadowy figure possessing neither a past nor an interior, and yet he is controlled both by history and ideas. The secondary figures in the novel instruct and obstruct Kay in his efforts to gain the attention of the powerful official Clam, who seems to possess the means of overcoming the bureaucracy which thwarts Kay's efforts. Frida momentarily appears to be able to provide an entree to Clam since she had once been his mistress, but this proves another of Kay's evanescent opportunities. Despite the fact that granting favors does not seem to materially better Frida's lot in life, the story Olga tells of her sister's refusal to sleep with another castle official reveals how devastating a lack of cooperation can be. One refusal ruins the entire family forever. Lit Helper. Classical Literature Summary and Analysis. The Castle, analysis of the novel by Franz Kafka. The Castle, written by Franz Kafka in 1922, falls into the category of the most significant and enigmatic philosophical novels of the XX century. In it, the writer raises an important theological problem of the path of the human being towards God. Containing literary traits of both modernism and existentialism, The Castle is, to the large extent, a metaphorical and even mythical work. The realities of life are present only so far. The artistic space of the novel is limited to the village and the castle overlooking it. The artistic time changes irrationally and without any explanation. The location of the castle is impossible to place into any precise geographical point. It contains the whole world. The castle is the prototype of heaven, the village of the earth. During the course of the whole novel, Various characters emphasize that there is no particular difference between the castle and the village, and that clearly points to one of the main points of Christianity about the unity and integrity of life on earth and in heaven. Action period in The Castle has no historical foothold. The only known fact about it is that there is winter now that will last, probably, for an eternity. The coming of spring, according to Peppy, who replaces barmaid Frida for a time, is short and often followed by snowfall. In the novel, winter is an author's perception of human life, steeped in cold, fatigue and constant show obstacles. The composition of the novel is not analyzable because of its incompleteness and peculiar plot development of The Castle. The novel has no dramatic downs and ups. The protagonist Kay arrives to the village as born and stays there forever to find the path toward the castle god. The novel, just like human life, does not have a classic beginning, development and culmination. Rather it is separated into conceptual parts that describe different stages of the life of the protagonist. In the beginning Kay poses as a land surveyor and finds out with a surprise that he is indeed a land surveyor. Kay receives 2 assistants from the castle, Arthur and Jeremiah. In the novel, these characters partly resemble angels, protector and destroyer, and partly children. The direct superior of Kay is Clam, an important official from the castle. Who is Clam? What does he look like? What is he? What is his expertise? Nobody knows that. Even Clam's messenger Barnabas has never seen Clam with his own eyes. It is not surprising that Kay and all residents of the village are irresistibly drawn to Clam. The protagonist understands that exactly Clam will help him find a way inside the castle. Clam is, in a way, a god for the village residents, despite the fact that the ruler of the castle is someone named Count Westwest, who is mentioned only once at the beginning of the novel. Like in any big literary work, The Castle has a nested story, the tale of Olga, Barnabas' sister, of a tragedy that happened with her family. The girl's story may be called the information culmination of the novel, that explains real interaction between the villagers and the castle officials to the reader. The villagers, in a manner usual to ordinary folk, idolize the officials, who are heavenly creatures. Good or evil is for everyone to decide for themselves. It is accustomed in the village to please the officials, fulfill their every whim. When Amalia, younger sister of Barnabas and Olga, refuses to visit Sortini in an inn, the news spread around in a moment, her family is immediately and completely isolated. Everyone stops working and communicate with them. Attempts of the father of the family to beg for forgiveness are ended with a severe sickness. Olga, who spends nights with the servants of the officials, can't achieve her being remembered in the castle. And only Barnabas, burning with sincere desire to serve in the castle, reaches the first registries churches where he meets pleaders, people, officials, priests, and sometimes even Clam God himself. The romantic storyline of the novel revolves around relationship between Kay and Frida. The protagonist notices her when he finds out that she is Clam's lover. He is attracted to Frida because of 2 reasons. She is good both as a mean of achieving his goal, personal meeting with Clam, and as impersonation of Clam in the castle. What leads Frida, who gives up her position, life, and a powerful lover god for a piss-poor land surveyor, is hard to understand. It is possible to assume that the girl wanted to challenge the society in order to become more recognized and loved by Clam after her return to him, repentance of her sins. Man can find no better retreat from the world than art, and man can find no stronger link with the world than art. Goethe. Franz Kafka's novel, The Castle, The Beginning. In Franz Kafka's novel, The Castle, Das Schloss 1926, published posthumously in 1930, the castle represents a symbol of power, control, and authority or abode of God. Even though unfinished, The Castle, too, is a significant work that exemplifies Kafka's extraordinary influence on fiction. It offers a haunting portrayal of a disjointed and inscrutable world, haunted by a sense of loss and confusion. The protagonist, Kay, coming to a village, spends his entire life trying to gain access to the castle, which represents his pursuit of recognition and acceptance in a society that he feels alienated from. In this essay, we will explore the significance of the castle as a symbol in Kafka's novel, and provide a critical overview of the themes and moral implications of the story. Kafka's narrative style. Kafka's narrative style in The Castle is deceptively simple, yet it carries a new depth to the expressionist principle. Through suggestive symbols, he delves into the mystery of human experience, exploring themes of bureaucracy, power, divinity, and the search for meaning. The novel's protagonist, Kay, is a land surveyor who arrives in a small village only to discover that he cannot reach the castle, despite being summoned there for work. The authorities who govern it from a castle is mysterious. Symbolism, the village and the castle. Kafka's use of symbols, such as the village and the castle, highlights the dichotomy between the mundane and the divine. The village represents the ordinary, everyday life, with its conventions, social structures, and values. The castle, on the other hand, stands for the divine dispensation, a realm of mystery and grace that is incomprehensible and remote. The castle is a powerful symbol of authority and control in the novel. It represents a kind of impenetrable fortress that is unreachable for the majority of people. This is evident in the opening lines of the novel, where the castle is described as, "It was late in the evening when Kay arrived. The village was deep in snow. The castle hill was hidden, veiled in mist and darkness, nor was there even a glimmer of light to show that a castle was there." On the wooden bridge leading from the main road to the village, Kay stood for a long time gazing into the illusory emptiness above him. Kafka, 1945, p. 3. This image sets the tone for the entire novel, as it portrays the castle as a place of power and control that is out of reach for the common people. The theme of The Castle, by Franz Kafka revolves around the struggle of the protagonist, Kay, to find his place in the world and establish a connection with the divine. The novel explores the tension between the desire for a normal, ordered life and the pursuit of something greater, beyond human comprehension. For Kay, the castle represents his deepest desire to be accepted and recognized by society or by the divinity. He believes that if he can gain access to the castle, he will be able to find his place in the world or the world beyond. Throughout the novel, Kay struggles to gain access to the castle and to understand the rules that govern the society around him. He is constantly frustrated by the bureaucracy and the labyrinthine nature of the society he is trying to navigate. This is reflected in his conversations with the officials he meets, who seem to be deliberately obstructive and unhelpful. Something beyond the ordinary. Through Kay's struggle to gain access to the castle and establish a relationship with it, Kafka depicts the human desire for something beyond the ordinary. Kay's efforts to lead a normal life, to establish a family and a career, are shown as mere techniques for improving his relationship with the castle, for coming closer to God. Thomas Mann says, "The Castle is through and through an autobiographical novel." The hero, who should originally speak in the first person, is called Kay. He is the author, who has only too literally suffered all these pains and these grotesque disappointments. In the story of his life there is a betrothal which is simply the essence of all melancholy miscarriages. And in the castle a prominent part is played by similar spasmodic efforts to found a family and arrive closer to God through leading a normal life. Kafka, 1945. Chaotic and confusing. However, as Kay becomes more and more involved with the castle, he begins to realize that it is not what he thought it was. The castle is not a place of order and control, but rather a chaotic and confusing place where nothing is as it seems. It can also be meant that the castle is beyond our ordinary human understanding. This is reflected in the scene where Kay is shown around the castle by an official, and is unable to make sense of the labyrinthine corridors and rooms he is taken through. In a version of the ending given by Franz Kafka to his Franz, the protagonist, Kay, dies of exhaustion after his desperate efforts to gain access to the castle and be confirmed in his appointment. The villagers gather around his deathbed when, at the very last moment, an order arrives from the castle granting him permission to settle in the village and work there. Despite Kay's lack of legal claim to live in the community, he is allowed to do so due to certain auxiliary circumstances. This final twist in the novel suggests that grace is ultimately granted, even in the face of apparent failure and exhaustion. Kafka's own acceptance of this outcome without bitterness is reflected in the novel's themes of the struggle for transcendence and the pursuit of something beyond the ordinary. Absurdity in Kafka's The Castle. The castle also represents the idea of the absurd in Kafka's novel. The absurdity of the castle is reflected in the way that the society it represents is governed by arbitrary rules and regulations that are impossible to understand. The officials who run the society seem to have no real authority, and their actions are often inexplicable and contradictory. This is evident in the scene where Kay is arrested by two officials, for no apparent reason. The protagonist's futile attempts to gain access to the castle and be recognized by its authorities highlight the absurdity of our understanding of divine essence. The Castle portrays the absurdity of human existence and the struggle to find meaning in a seemingly meaningless world where epitome of God is beyond our comprehension. Conclusion. In conclusion, Kafka's The Castle is a powerful commentary on the human condition and the quest for transcendence. Through the use of the castle as a symbol, Kafka highlights the absurdity of a society governed by power and control, and the moral implications of such a system. Furthermore, the novel explores the idea of understanding divinity, as represented by the incomprehensible and remote castle. Kafka's exploration of this theme through symbolism and psychological depth has had a profound impact on subsequent generations of writers and continues to resonate with readers today. Synopsis: a land surveyor, Franz K., travels to a mysterious village where his services are needed. However, sometime after his arrival, he is told that he has been wrongly appointed. K then decides to stay and attempts to gain access to the authorities who govern the village at an impenetrable castle. Why you will like the castle. 1. Kafka's ultimate novel. If you have read The Trial, America and his other short stories, you will easily recognize in this book the progress made by Kafka to become the best writer he could turn into. In The Castle, his potential is fully unleashed and he puts his bizarre style to good use, just like a seasoned writer would. The Castle is also an improvement from The Trial in many other ways. Almost every character in the book has had a difficult past which Kafka uses to evoke pathos. The story is not over-focused on the main character, the quest to reach the remote authority is more elaborate than in The Trial. 2. The underlying message. A seemingly bizarre story, The Castle conveys the powerful and strongly relevant dystopian message that life is Kafkaesque. The book is, I quote Wikipedia, because I couldn't put it in a better way, about alienation, bureaucracy, the seemingly endless frustrations of man's attempts to stand against the system, and the futile and hopeless pursuit of an unobtainable goal. It also falls among those books of Kafka that have greatly inspired authors like Albert Camus and Samuel Beckett. As a matter of fact, The Castle and Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus are strongly alike in nature. In short, like The Trial, The Castle is one of those books that broaden your mind. You will gain much by reading it. 3. Unique touch of modernism. It's no news that The Castle falls among literature's earliest modern works. This is the case with each other book of Kafka. However, it is interesting to see the techniques and ideas which Kafka made use of to give The Castle the same touch of modernism that has characterized his other stories. 4. In writing The Castle, Franz Kafka was for the umpteenth time turning to his unique and bizarre modernist style. Would he finally run out of ideas for his final novel? To general surprise, The Castle turned out to be a highly original book. The more so, when we consider that it was Kafka's longest novel. By the end of the book, you will be left wondering from where did the Czech genius draw the resources to write so unique a story. 4. The protagonist. Since the protagonists of The Castle and The Trial are both named K, I will use the same argument I employed in my review of The Trial to justify why it was a master strike from Kafka to give such a name to his character. His name is K, but he is referred to as K. Why K? Because Kafka didn't want to give him an individuality, in which case the character would seem to be living his own adventure. K is not a name, but rather a code name purposed to identify the protagonist. Why did Kafka feel the need to give him a code name? Simply to help us better identify with K and his quest. His adventure is ours, K is us. Why you might not like The Castle. 1. The language. When I wrote posts about The Trial in America for this series, I remember having deemed the language a barrier between the readers and Kafka's world. Sadly, The Castle shares the same shortcoming. The English translation of the Old German used by Kafka he lived in the late 1800s and early 1900s is not as fluid and modern as you would like it to be. The language is a far cry from those employed by authors like Golding, Lee or even Wilde, and because of that, you might feel that the book is heavy. 2. The slow pace. As opposed to The Trial, which was straightforward, The Castle moves at a slow pace. Sure, this might be recognized as a proof of Kafka's progress, but in the end, some readers might get impatient and wish K would have done things differently, for bear in mind that The Castle is about the quest for something unattainable. You might get irritated at K's attitude and decide to stop reading the book midway. Besides, the slow pace at which events follow in this novel somehow softens the impact of the message it conveys. 3. Unfinished. Like all other novels of Kafka, The Castle is unfinished. But unlike The Trial and very much like America, The Castle does not have an ending. In fact, it stops midway and leaves you wondering what would have happened next, the only clue of which being what Kafka told his friend Max Brod would happen to K. While some readers will hail this abrupt stop in the story as a tragic happenstance that bizarrely squares with Kafka's style, I know that others will be hugely disappointed with the ending. Verdict. As a huge fan of Kafka, I loved reading The Castle. The ideas were modernist and unique. Kafka once again gave me much to ponder over, and the message it conveys is strong and will never wane away. But will I recommend this novel to anyone? No, for I know that, due to its shortcomings, there's a good chance that the general reader will be easily bored and turned off by it. However, The Castle is a great book and is a must-read if you're a fan of Kafka or if you wish to gain a different outlook on life. Just be aware that it has its shortcomings and is not another version of The Trial, which I still prefer, to be honest.